Hello, hello. Alright, should we talk a little bit about Linux? Yes, we probably should. Now, why would you watch this video? Very first question. Dude, I don't know. You're probably bored and you've seen a couple of Linux experience videos so far from like larger channels. Those focus on their first Linux experience, right? Which usually involves installing stuff like that and figuring out how updates work. And this is not exactly what this video aims to be. It's more like me giving a perspective after using Linux for about 4 years as my daily driver. So, as most people, I'm an ex-Windows user. I guess my first contact with it was in about 1996 when I was 7. So I went through most of the iterations: 95, 98, Windows 7, Windows 10, and did decide to not use Windows 11 because I had issues with Windows constantly, such as broken updates resulting in this kind of loop where the Windows Update agent gets stuck and you actually have to go into the Services Manager and disable that and roll back the update and download it anew. I've had to deal with viruses, Microsoft's privacy policy, the UI changes from 10 to 11, such as the fact that they put the start menu into the middle, and it's basically not even a start menu anymore. It just lists a bunch of recommended apps, and you will have to do this extra click, right, to get to your apps, which is also full of ads and whatnot. So it was not exactly the thing I wanted. I went with Linux Mint. Now I'm gonna start running a small script that I wrote. It is my very first script and we'll briefly go over that. Basically what it does is it does all the things for me. Put in the secure password, which is not 123. It performs a full system update, downloads a bunch of apps, and also configures my desktop, which is pretty neat. Now, it will take a little bit, that's just to give you guys some visual context. Anyways, I decided to go with Linux Mint as my, well, starter distro because it is arguably the most Windows-like and it is a very, very good out-of-the-box experience. You have your start menu down here. You have pre-installed Office packs and whatnot. Web browser is also pre-installed. We go with Firefox and Linux Mint, which is always a matter of choice. You can also have things like a fork or a Chrome-based browser. Doesn't even matter. I'm gonna assume that people watching this video are aware of most of those things already. Back in those days, I had no idea, so switching to Linux was not that smooth. I think it took me about half a year to get most of the software, which we're gonna be talking a little bit later about, together, so to say, my set of software stuff that I want for my environment, and also settle for a desktop environment. And God, I did so much distro hopping, which we'll get to in a second. Now, when I switched to Linux, I did have some expectations, which was being able to encode video in a more fancy way, such as setting up a frame server and making use of that in Linux, which is normally done in Windows, as far as I have learned it. I also wanted to do web browsing, media consumption, do gaming for like older games, because I don't play a whole lot of AAA games. I play things like Terraria, Risk of Rain, to Borderlands, that kind of stuff. And most importantly, two more things: complete authority over my PC. not having to mess with file permissions too much by default, like Windows, and also hardware compatibility with my NVIDIA graphics card, which is not a good start for Linux. Right, so there were a lot of distros to choose from. We have the base distros, which is basically just Debian. We have Fedora, we have Arch Linux, and we have OpenSUSE, and those fork into all those other things, right? As far as I'm concerned. So basically you can use Debian's packet manager on any Ubuntu-based distribution such as Elementary or, well, Linux Mint. But it is still based on Debian. Same for Fedora, same basically for Arch-based. It's just the way of distributing the packages and also, of course, the architecture. As far as I'm concerned, at least. So I had a lot of options, and not only were there the base distribution packages, but also the desktop environments, right? You have Linux Mint Cinnamon, you have KDE, you have XFCE4, you also have GNOME, you also have Pantheon, kind of. Budgie, Mate, I'm very much looking forward to Cosmic, and you have your window managers. That's a lot of stuff to sort out, right? That's a lot of options. So beginners go with Linux Mint and Cinnamon Desktop. I, after 4 years, am also going with Cinnamon on a Linux Mint based distribution. However, I'm using Debian. I decided to not use the Ubuntu version of Linux Mint anymore because I had some severe problems with my audio, where I had to actually disable Pipewire and re-download, which is also what the script does, and basically re-enable Pulse Audio to get rid of crackling noises and stuff, which was annoying. And I don't think that should be part of my experience. Don't have that in Debian, so I can run Pipewire audio just fine. And I don't have to worry about it. I've also tried KDE, tried to get along with it, but I just found it a little bit too convoluted, a little bit too much clicking involved and rebinding the keybinds, because they are a little bit different from Cinnamon, for example, with virtual workspaces, using the super key instead of the alt key. And there's no overview by default and stuff like that. So I had to sort all of this out, went back to basically the environment that I had already known, even on other distros, not just Linux Mint. I noticed I was even on Endeavour OS, which I ran for a year. Most of the time I was on Cinnamon. Right, now when you use one of those desktop environments, right, you kind of want to have a software suite that also goes a little bit with the theming, which is a bit messy when it comes to the distinction between GNOME Theming Kit 3 apps and version 4 ones, right? So libadwaita, you have your rounded bottom corners, which Linux Mint, for example, doesn't really have in Cinnamon. You can have it on KDE Plasma by adding window borders, and I believe there's a way to like swap the terminal, and you can also swap your file explorer to make it more like GNOME, but at that point you could just download GNOME, to be honest, which is not really what I wanted. But yeah, the amount of software, if you narrow it down and if you do a little bit of customization and you want to have it, well, more or less streamlined into your system, there's not too many options, to be honest. In the end, honestly, I went with Rhythmbox for my music player. It does all the things that I want. It has a library indexing feature. It displays a little bit of the album cover, which is nice. It plays back all my media, and yeah, it just works, and it's also pre-installed. That's pretty much it. Same for video. I just use Celluloid. which is also pre-installed on Linux Mint. It is a simple front end for MPV, and it's small, it's quite fast. I can, if I want, add some plugins to it. It's great. For my web browser, I decided to go with a Firefox fork in the mentality of Debian, and it not receiving many updates. I went with WaterFox, which is basically like Firefox. You install it via Flatpak, I guess, and it has all the add-ons that I want. It has uBlock Origin, it has Privacy Badger. All those things that are available on Firefox are available in WaterFox as well, right? It just doesn't have the radio boxes for telemetry, and the sidebar is disabled, I believe. I haven't used Firefox in a while, so I forget. As for image manipulation, which I do a little bit, I'm going with GIMP because, well, it's free Photoshop basically, and I've been using GIMP for over 10 years. Also on Windows, I don't do heavy image editing. It's more like putting layers on top of each other and trying to make them look neat. That's what I do. I don't even distribute those, so they're more wallpapers. I do a little bit of Office. It is LibreOffice for me, because why not? There's no alternative. As for updates, I'm going also, since I'm on a Debian-based, this machine here is also on a Debian-based distribution, right? Is running on one. So you can just use the update manager that comes with Linux Mint, and it also incorporates all the Flatpak updates if you've installed any. Where is it? The update manager right here, which is also what's happening in the terminal right now, by the way. What's next? I do a little bit of streaming along with my gaming, so I'm using OBS, obviously. Now, I had a little bit of an issue getting it to work on Wayland, which is also a reason for me to personally use Linux Mint for now, because they have X11 as a default session, which still works a little bit better with NVIDIA graphics cards as far as I'm concerned, and I can use the browser plugin, which is kind of not a thing on Wayland sessions for me. I tried it across different distros and I couldn't get it to work. There's a couple other applications that I tend to use, such as Media Info and MKV Toolnix Guy for media editing basically, and reading the metadata. Just wanted to mention those real quick. And I think that's all the base software that I use. Now, after getting the software, all of that together, and well, having that installed and having indexed all my music, I need a theme, right, to go with it, because, well, this looks kind of old. I personally went with a lighter theme, which is a matter of taste, I guess, called Fluent Round Light. Link should be in the description of the video. Along with an icon set called Nordzy, which is unfortunately deprecated or not maintained anymore, but as for a backup, I can use the Nord version of Tala, which is a flat icon set, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but it works well for my purposes. But yeah, I found it very important to like have those apps in the same style. So if this doesn't have rounded corners, my music player, so should my video player not have rounded corners either, right? So shouldn't the file explorer. Else, if the terminal has rounded corners and my file explorer, for example, doesn't, but my web browser does, it kind of doesn't fit together. And the virtual machine just crashed. Let's go to my actual system. It's not that bad. So this is how my system looks. I made it a little bit brighter. This is the theme I'm using for my file explorer, so it all looks bright and neat. That's the video that I'm recording right now. The icon set is basically looking like this, giving it a little bit more refined and noble, I guess you could say, look. Same for the start menu. If I use a dark theme, I'll probably swap to Graphbox, but that's like an entirely different thing. So I'll also have to adjust my conky, I'll also have to adjust my wallpaper and all the things. Another point I quickly want to talk about is obviously gaming. I use Steam, I use Proton. Due to the games that I play, I kind of have to use Proton Experimental. One example being Borderlands 2, which I've played a little bit too much of. I tend to play with the DLCs, haven't set it up just yet, but I need to force Proton Experimental, which also requires me to like get the newest NVIDIA graphics card driver from the NVIDIA repos, actually. I know it's a little bit of a Frankenstein, and I know it's frowned upon, but literally I can't play the game differently. It's just another thing, and I bought it, so I want to play it, right? Also, older games, I noticed I do have Tropico 126. This one just doesn't play. I just can't get it to run well. It crashes all the time. There's graphical artifacts. It doesn't look like this does, so that's a shame. I also had to deal with an issue called the Steam overlay, which I decided to not use for a little bit, and turns out, where is it? You can't deactivate it. It might lead to like a graphical glitch, something like that. I couldn't run games anymore. They would start to lag after 30 minutes, 45 minutes. It was a terrible experience. And lastly, I guess that's not really Steam's fault, but kind of the distro's fault and compatibility with the graphics driver. Resizing Steam on some of the distros that I've done, like this is already pretty bad. You can see the black bars, right? This is already bad. Other distros though, they had issues rescaling. Even if I go to the interface and enable the accelerated rendering, it was still bad. Plus, I don't want to have to do that. That's a terrible experience for me personally. Other issues with Linux, I guess. Not many. I don't really care about the Wayland versus X11 debate because, well, I don't have the many options, right? I can't even use Fedora because they entirely dropped X11 support, which is a shame. I did want to try it out, but it turns out I'm just not well supported with my hardware, which is a shame. But I guess that's also what they kind of mean when they say you don't choose your Linux distro, in the end it chooses you. Distro hopping is another little issue of mine. I might swap distros, but for the moment I'm very happy with how my distro works. I have apps that don't require system access flat packed, so they stay in a jail. I have a virtual machine that is able to run Windows 11 for my crude video encoding, which I couldn't get to work on Linux, but since it doesn't require anything fancy like a GPU pass-through or whatever, I can just use a portion of my CPU for it. Now, one more issue I may be having in the future is a lot of waste on my system. I know the procedure how to clean my Flatpak applications and via apt, but that's it. And there may be orphans, there may be leftover graphic shaders which aren't fully removed by Steam or whatever, leftover files by stuff that I download from Flatpak, for example. But that's a thing that I don't need to worry about for too much. right now. Okay, final thoughts for the video. I think I learned a lot over the past 4 years, and I'm very happy to be able to run a system that basically takes care of itself and is also very non-intrusive. I don't have to restart my PC every now and then if I don't want to, because I don't have a whole lot of kernel updates. Sometimes the graphics driver will require me to restart, but that's just because I'm using a different version than the one that is provided by Debian. Furthermore, it's very nice to be able to customize your system the way you want it to, do your everyday tasks, play games, the ones that you enjoy without having to make too many compromises. I'm really happy with it. And I guess that'll be all for this video. Thank you guys for watching.